This meeting is being recorded.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Living Mythology, I'm proud to bring you retro sci-fi and horror cinema with the one, the only, Brian Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater. Greetings and welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Hercules. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to the horror extravaganza you have prepared for us.
Well, fantastic. And you know, I live in a college town, and this time of year is known as the most wonderful time of the year. Not Christmas, it's May, because we just graduated 4,500 students.
Wow.
9/10 of our student population has relocated for the summer. You can actually drive across town in just a few minutes as opposed to an hour. Parking is everywhere. The stores actually have product. I'm serious. Half the town leaves, and then wow, this town ain't so bad after all. And it made me kind of nostalgic for years gone by. And graduation is such a big part of this time of year. High school and college graduation. That's a huge rite of passage. High school graduation is sort of your pathway into adulthood. Admittedly, barely, but I mean, it's a demarcation of sorts. And college graduation means, okay, you're not your parents' responsibility anymore. It's get out there and go to work, kid, pay bills. And it's lessons like that my students really don't learn. They're all so many of them are so quick to want to get out of. Can you still see me, Hercules?
I can still see you.
Okay, my laptop's acting goofy. Anyway, so many of my students are just hell-bent on finishing their educations as soon as possible. And I think that's a really bad idea. Gosh, I wish I could go back and be a college student again, not for the classes, but for the relationships you make and the fun that you have, and it's made me nostalgic for graduation, high school or college graduation. And there are a ton of slasher films made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even today, really, that all center on high schools and colleges and the horrific things that happen in them. And that's what I want to talk about today. There are some really famous ones that everybody knows, and I'll just, Friday the 13th, for example, the 1980 version, takes place at Camp Crystal Lake, which is a camp for, I think, late elementary and early middle schoolers to take part in. They never get there because all the camp counselors, will wind up on the wrong side of the dirt. And then it's so odd to think of it now that way, but that movie's actually now a cultural touchstone. It's sort of it's a seminal text, it's canonized at this point. I mean, it's something that it is 42 years old, which is just a mind-blowing to think of. But it also set a lot of the parameters for teen-based slasher films in the 80s, and very easily parodied at that. Now, I love Friday the 13th for a lot of reasons, and I'll get to those a little later.
Mm-hmm.
I just running some searches in IMDb, looking for different titles. I was shocked at the number of just the sheer number of films I was able to come up with that had a college, murders on college campuses or demonology or witchcraft or whatever, and the same thing in high schools. So I've been on a real spree of watching late 70s, early 80s slasher flicks. And those are the movies I grew up on. I graduated from high school during the heyday of slasher films. And I went to see them all the time. I probably saw one every couple of weeks or so, and it didn't matter how good or bad quality wasn't really way up on the list. but they were fun to watch, and the casts were amazing. I'm big into directors, and I love a really solid cast. People who these movies are largely populated. The casts are populated by people who are either on their way up or on their way down. And
Yeah.
Friday the 13th is actually, you've got a good example of both. Kevin Bacon is in the original Friday the 13th. And I think he had been on a soap opera around that time. Or maybe it was either right before or right after Friday the 13th. But that's the movie that really gave him some career momentum. And Betsy Palmer is the fading actor, unfortunately, in Friday the 13th. And interestingly, she is an actress and television personality that I have probably watched my entire life. She used to be a regular panelist for years on game shows. She was on I've Got a Secret, the original one with Gary Moore and Bess Meyerson. She did that show for years, and I've probably seen all of those, on Sunday night, in black and white. The Game Show Network used to run about 25 years ago. And Betsy Palmer did a lot of television, episodic stuff. Did some movies in the 50s, but by the time that Friday the 13th rolled around, she was divorced and had some money problems. And she didn't want to do the movie, but did it for the money, and that's, I hate to say it, but that's why most of us get up in the morning and go to work. Well, got to pay a bill. And you know what, with that hanging over your head, you might think that some of these actors, especially the ones on the way down, might not give it their all. They might just say, well, check's a check. I'll stand here on the X and read the lines and be done with it. 201, I mean, they're all fantastic in these movies. They're chewing on the scenery. Well, some of them, not all of them. Some of them give very good restrained performances. But the casts are so much fun to watch in these films. I wanted to try to figure out where the origin for slasher films comes from.
I can answer some of that.
I can too. With another segue through my childhood. But I wanted to go back and think, when do all of these teen movies really start showing up? And of course, it's the baby boomer heyday. In the 50s, you start seeing a lot of movies about teens. Before that, and I'm a huge fan of the 1930s movies. I used to watch a lot of silent films from the 1920s, although unfortunately I haven't done that for years. All of those are very adult for the most part. There's not a whole lot about children there. It's all, sometimes people well into adulthood. But as the baby boomers came along in the 50s, and there were just more and more of them, a lot of movies about teens started to get produced to get those kids into those theater seats. And a real big favorite one of mine, one of the early ones, is I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Yes.
With Michael, which is it's a cheap movie. It's AIP, but AIP made some good movies, in spite of themselves sometimes. And a lot of it had to do with the cast that they picked. They picked quality people who were going to show up and know their lines. And that's showing up's 90% of life. Let's face it. If you give a good performance on top of that, great. But at least be here in the suit, read these lines. But Michael Landon, I got to tell you, I don't think he ever gave a better performance than the one he gives in I Was a Teenage Werewolf. I mean, he's throwing every emotion he has into every line. It's something but I mean, you can see how he would have been, very frustrated, and he was already, kind of trigger happy anyway. And then to be turning into a werewolf, sort of the ultimate in, misanthropy, I guess. It's just a stunning movie to watch. I like its companion piece too. I Was a Teenage Werewolf was a huge hit for AIP. It made gobs of money. there again, it gave Michael Landon's career, a great kickoff. I mean, he became somebody, and I would be willing to say that that movie had something to do with it because he made such a splash in it, and it was a very highly charged performance. I don't have a Michael Landon page, but I do have a Gary Conway page, who is the title character in I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, which is inspired by I Was a Teenage
movie. Yeah.
And I Was a Teenage Frankenstein first saw that movie when I was a kid, and the makeup that they've got Gary Conway in, after the accident it's kind of creepy. It's kind of terrifying. It scared me, as a child. It doesn't now, but if you're far enough away from the screen, if you don't have such a high resolution on your screen, it still looks pretty good. And then there was How to Make a Monster, which was derived from both of those movies and used some of the same cast. That's actually a fun movie. That's not so horror based. It's kind of tongue in cheek horror comedy. And that's actually a subgenre I like a lot. I like a little horror, mixed in with my comedy and vice versa. I tried to find some movies this week that would go along with our subject tonight, in archive.org, which is a repository of public domain movies. And I thought, gosh, I'm going to have trouble finding something. And right off the bat, found like 2 or 3 things. I didn't even have to start. I didn't have to keep searching because there was just so much, and one of them is a film that I ran. Actually, I'm running today, called Sisters of Death. It's a movie I've seen several times. It has Arthur Franz, who was a well-known character actor, instantly recognizable, did hundreds of hours of episodic TV, was in some good horror movies in the 50s. Claudia Jennings, who is a cult figure these days. She was in a lot of 70s drive-in movies, a little bit of everything too, pretty much any genre that you could think of. She ran through, and unfortunately, she had broken up with a boyfriend. She was still young too, maybe in her late 20s, maybe possibly 30. And she'd broken up with a boyfriend and left him, and he stalked her and murdered her.
Ooh.
Yeah. And she's a cult figure because she's in some fantastic 70s drive-in movies. And it's just sad that she wasn't allowed to go on. Paul Carr is in it too. And he can be seen in everything. He was in Star Trek, the original series back in the 60s. He was in movies in the 50s. He's in Track of the Moon Beast. He's in a little bit of everything, and he's in Sisters of Death. Sisters of Death actually sat on the shelf for a long time. It was originally shot in 1972, but it didn't see the light of day until late 76 or early 77. But it's really not a bad movie. It's about these, 4 young ladies who had experienced the death of a friend, and Arthur Franz turns out to be that friend's father, and he invites them all, to his. I hesitate to call it a mansion, but it's a very large house. And then I don't want to spoil it, but one by one, people start dying. So it's a lot of fun, though. And it was the initial story in and of itself takes place at a college, So now the rest of the action takes place, in this very large house. But I thought it was a fun one to run today. And yesterday I ran a really terrible Jerry Warren film called Teenage Zombies. Jerry Warren, golly, exclusively made bad movies. It's almost as if he tried. Now that said, he had no money, but that's not really an excuse. There are a lot of filmmakers who back in the 50s didn't have any money. And they could turn out watchable stuff. They could turn out decent quality. Jerry Warren couldn't. And to tell you the truth, his movies are watchable if only to be appalled by how bad they are. So it's one of those so bad it's good kind of things with him. And
Mhm.
he used a lot of the same people over and over again. But Don Sullivan was his star in Teenage Zombies, who there again, this is another hallmark of the teen slasher film. None of these people are teenagers.
Mhm.
They're all
Yeah.
just a little bit older than that, and some of them quite a bit older. And in this case, Don Sullivan's about 30 years old, and he's portraying this like 16-year-old. But there again, you see that a lot in these movies.
Yes, you do.
And you need somebody who can carry a lot of emotional weight. You need somebody who can, show aggression, show fear, and that's not that teenagers aren't really good at showing fear or aggression,
Mhm.
but being able to do it on command. I think I think you do need somebody who's got some acting experience, for things like that. And the lead in a movie carries it's a lot of weight. The
Yes.
lead should always make twice as much as the other person, no matter who the lead is, because that's tough. That would have to be like being in an emotional ringer every day, screaming your head off, or shouting, or trying to, you're in a scene and you're trying to escape from somebody. You would relive that at night, right? I mean, I would
Mhm.
wake up, good. Somebody's coming after me with a knife or something like that. That's a pretty tough role to play,
Mhm.
and I think you have to get a more mature actor who maybe is good at looking good. I've got another example of that a little later on in a
Okay.
movie that was released in the late 80s, which it's very egregious, and the person who's in it's close to 40 years old and playing a teenager,
Like a
but
teenager, of course.
but but looks great. So you can sort of give her a pass, but we'll talk about that in a minute. A movie that I stumbled upon when I was doing research for this that I had never really run across before is called Massacre at Central High. And it's
Okay.
there's some unusual things about it. Now, it's a typical drive-in horror movie. Takes place at a high school. There's a murderer running amok, in a high school. And it's got a really high quality cast of people moving up. You know, um,
Mhm.
Andrew Stevens, who was so popular in the late 70s. He's the son of Stella Stevens, and there for a few years was on his way to being a big star. Married Kate Jackson, in the late 70s for a couple of minutes or so, and became a director and did all kinds of his own. When his career started petering out, he decided he was going to make his own movies and kept his career going. That's incredibly smart,
That is
and
very
difficult
smart.
and difficult. That's hard work, to pull all that off. And I mean, he's quite a guy, in that respect. Um, and it's a pretty good movie. Steve Bond from General Hospital is in it. He
Mhm.
did some other movies, here and there. Did some television movies. But I would say that his role in General Hospital was probably the thing he's best known for now. And Daryl Morey, who was in a lot of movies there until he kind of ended his career in his 30s, and then moved on to something else. But the interesting thing about Massacre at Central High, it's very unusual in that nearly all of the victims are male. In a lot of horror movies, unfortunately, you do get
Female.
a ton of female victims, depending on depending on the film, but tons and tons of female victims. And in this one, it's the opposite. Lots of male victims and murdered. Well, gosh, I don't want to give too much of the. I'd like for people to watch it if anybody's. I mean, if you're interested in seeing this movie, I don't want to throw out a spoiler, but it's interesting what happens to the protagonist in this, because the protagonist turns into the antagonist, kind of midstream. It's a better movie than I think its budget might suggest, but it doesn't look bad. You know, it looks pretty good.
Mhm.
And it's easily found. I stumbled upon it on YouTube. So you don't have an excuse for not watching it. But it's there again. You know, it's actually pretty good. And you know, to see it's the guys screaming, you know, instead of the women screaming. It's like, wow, that's kind of refreshing. Um, I really liked that. The one that we have been watching over the last hour and a half or so is one that we actually had in our own vaults. And it's a made for TV movie, but it's a lot of fun. It's called Satan's School for Girls.
Yes, I remember that one.
It's Aaron Spelling, who did, you know, all kinds of, he did Dynasty, he did lots of Charlie's Angels, and it's an interesting tie-in there because you know he was the producer of Charlie's Angels, and two of the actresses from Charlie's Angels are in Satan's School for Girls. But this movie was the ABC Movie of the Week in early 19, well, I think mid 1973, and he cast Kate Jackson and Cheryl Ladd in in a couple of medium-sized parts. They weren't the lead by any means. Pamela Franklin is the lead in Satan's School for Girls. And it's got some interesting cast choices as well. Jo Van Fleet, who's in East of Eden, is the headmistress at I guess it's a college, but it says Satan's School for Girls, but there again, these girls are probably like 25, 26 years old. They don't look young. And they are living on campus. So I think we will call that a college.
Okay.
Or they were held back a few years, one or the other. But the movie's a lot of fun. And I got to tell you, Pamela Franklin is the star of it. And I always found her so watchable. She's in, oh golly, what is the name of it? I'm going to have to look this up. I think it's called The Haunting of Hill House, but let me take a look just to make sure. Give me a second here. Of Hill House, yes, which was remade a few years ago. But she's fantastic in it. She's this psychic who sort of has a nervous breakdown in the Haunting of Hill House. But it's interesting to see her turn up in this Aaron Spelling made for TV movie. She's a British actress, but she's giving it her. She's trying to sound like she's from America. So she does a good job with the accent. Every once in a while, when she says Martha, you can tell she's British. But other than that, I mean, she does a really good job in it. And it's a fun movie. It's the title. The movie isn't bad by any means, but the title, to tell you the truth, I think is probably better than the film. But that's okay because the title is what gets you to tune in, right? It's what gets you to watch. Yeah. So, titles and posters should be the best part of the movie if you think about it, because that's what motivates you to sit down. That's what, that's why you buy a ticket. And I think that's one of the reasons why I do have kind of a burgeoning collection of lobby cards and other movie memorabilia, is because the artwork is just fabulous. You can tell where they spent the money. And the titles are lurid, and I mean, they just pull you in. You gotta see it, even though you might think it's a little tawdry or something like that. But good title.
I was a fan of Ed Wood, and Ed Wood, in his writings and writings about him, I would say the posters were produced first before anyone was cast, before anything was
AIP
written.
did that a lot too. Mm-hmm. They would go ahead and do the poster, and it's like, okay, find some kid, pay some kid $500 to write a script around it.
And that's what they do.
But like I said, that's the most important part of of a film, really. You got to have a title and you got to have marketing materials. How are you going to get people to come in and watch this? So spend money on those first before anything else, and you'll have a hit, or at least something respectable.
The movie.
Will flop, yeah. Well, you'll watch how much you spend on things, and that kind of brings me to, I know we've talked about this movie before, but it's one of my favorites. It is my favorite Dario Argento movie. It's called Suspiria.
Yes.
And in some circles, it's best known as Joan Bennett's final film. She is the fading star of the movie, and is just fantastic in it. For those people who are our ages, they will remember Joan Bennett from the old ABC Gothic soap opera Dark Shadows. She is the matriarch. She is Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, and it's her mansion where all of the activity takes place in that ABC Gothic soap opera, which was so much fun. The most inventive, most creative soap opera storylines ever, just a fabulous show. I still will go on tangents every few years, and you'll watch a couple of seasons of it. It's probably the only binge watching I've ever done is Dark Shadows, but it's worth it. And they were short. They were only like 20 minutes or so if you took the commercials out of them.
Right.
So you could watch a couple of weeks worth of episodes in 2 hours. It didn't take very long. But Suspiria is just a fabulous movie. It takes place in this German ballet school. And it was originally, parts were written for 12-year-olds. However, this is a pretty dark movie, and trying to cast a 12-year-olds in this movie, well, that would have been, it would have been an interesting film to watch, but it would have been even more disturbing than it is. So in order to get financing for it, Argento had to do a few things. He wanted to find an American-like lead, and he did with Jessica Harper, who's had she's in her early 70s now, but it's had a fantastic career. There again, a really good character actress she turned into. But in this, she's the lead. He wanted Joan Bennett to be the headmistress at this school, which is really I guess it's not too much of a spoiler to say that the school is run by a coven of witches. Maybe it is. But Joan Bennett is the headmistress, and didn't really want to do the movie. Joan Bennett, and I do have a page for her on Brian's Drive-In Theater. She came from a dynasty of actors. Her father was an actor. Her sister, Constance Bennett, was a huge star in the 30s. And Joan Bennett was sort of the also ran, in terms of, she was always in Constance Bennett's shadow, because Constance Bennett was the bigger star. And they looked a lot alike too. They were both blonde. They had similar facial structure. In some pictures, they're kind of hard to tell apart. Well, in the late 30s, for a film role, Joan Bennett had to dye her hair black. And it was her really first successful film, and I can't remember the title at this point, but it was kind of gave her career a big boost. And she decided to keep her hair dark for the remainder of her career because it did set her apart. And as she moved into the 1940s, she also started doing a lot of film noir, and the whole mysterious brunette thing really worked for her. She did a fantastic job. She's in several Fritz Lang movies, and that is what attracted Dario Argento to her. He was a huge Fritz Lang fan. He loved film noir. He loves, I should say, he's not dead. He loves film noir. And if you watch his movies, you can see some camera angles and lighting and shading and such, which he has which he has obviously seen in noir, and then wanted to bring it over into giallo, which does have a lot of noir tendencies. Giallo is sort of a mixture of horror and film noir, and you had a lot of films in the 40s and 50s made in America, which also had noir undertones. Some horror films did, and some noir films had some horror undertones. So it's kind of easy to see where giallo came from, and Argento is probably the best known of the giallo directors. I would certainly make that argument. But he, there again, was a big fan of Fritz Lang's movies, and Joan Bennett was in a lot of them, and some of these are her best movies. Secret Beyond the Door, Scarlet Street, which is a noir title that probably everybody who likes noir has seen. The Woman in the Window, another very good film. All of those starred her. He decided that this is this is my aging star that I want in it, and she didn't want to do it. She saw the script and she didn't like all the violence in it. She didn't. I think initially she thought that, oh, they want me for my Dark Shadows rep, because she had a real cult following in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And that was kind of odd for an actress, at that stage in her career. She had been really famous once upon a time. She had a fantastic career, and then it all kind of got blown out of the water in the early 50s. She was having an affair with her agent, and her husband was Walter Wanger, the director, and he became so incensed that she was having an affair with him that he shot her agent in the crotch. Ooh. And it ruined both of their careers. She could only get like B movies after that. She's in high, which she does a good job of it. She's not slack. Yeah. But and for a few years she didn't get any film roles at all, and she was kind of at the peak of her success at that time. She's really well known, and then boom, there went her career. So when Dark Shadows came along, and it was just kind of an inexpensive soap opera shot in Connecticut, and it hit, she was a star, and I think that was one of the things that she really liked about making movies. And you can find some quotes attributed to Joan Bennett in that making movies was kind of a drag, but she liked all the trappings. she loved being a star, liked to go to premieres. Loved to be interviewed. Just a big fan of all the pomp and circumstance around it, and I think that's a really healthy attitude, quite honestly.
Yes.
Your work is your work, but everything else that comes with being a movie star, I think is very hard to take. But if you can find personal enjoyment in it, wow, I mean, you're going to love life, And I think like I said, I think she had a really healthy, positive attitude about it all. But there again, she didn't want to do Dario Argento's movie because she wanted to do something gothic. She didn't want to do something, killer mom. Yeah. But interestingly, her boyfriend then, and then later became her, I think, fourth husband, David Wilde, loved one of Dario Argento's movies called The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is actually a fantastic movie. It was released in 1970, and Tony Musante and Susie Kendall are the leads in it, and it's fantastic. It's a really good movie. And based on the fact that he liked one of Dario Argento's early films, he talked Joan Bennett into taking the role. And in exchange for that, she was paid fairly handsomely for her services. Got a free trip to Rome, good, nice accommodations, best food. Unfortunately, sometimes the Italians can take a while on things, and I think she was used to something more regimented, especially working in a soap opera. We have to shoot 5 scenes before lunch. And she came up through the studio system where things were pretty regimented, and she gets to Rome where it's just, oh yeah, let's have a glass of And I think it took her a little while to acclimate to that, although I think she did, there at the end. And it's just a fantastic movie. I can't throw out too many spoilers about it because it would ruin the film, and there's some fantastic plot twists in it. But it does take place in a ballet school in this case, and there is a body count, so thumbs up. and it fits the assignment. So we finally get to where I start coming in on all of this stuff. We get into the late 70s when I was finally old enough to go to the movies on my own, and one of the films that I can remember seeing vividly is Halloween, the original one with Jamie Lee Curtis and PJ Soles, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill's a movie, which is a fabulous movie. Made pretty inexpensively and made with people in it who had some experience. Jamie Lee Curtis had been, and that was her breakout role, but she'd been working, as a teenager in stuff. And PJ Soles had been around for a while too. She's another one of the 30-year-old teenagers that you see in some of these films, but very convincingly portrays an 18-year-old. I think she seems younger than Jamie Lee Curtis in this, and she's got to have 10 years on her. But I think it's a lot of it's her attitude and the way she's dressed. And PJ Soles, I think, is a really good actress, and you could convey that in her body movements and her attitude. And she certainly looks the part as well. She's got the pigtails and such, but and gum chewing and whatnot. But there again, just a fantastic movie. Blew me away when I first saw it. I had never seen another film like it, and it was on in a double feature. Movie hadn't been out that long when I got to see it, so I probably got to see it maybe a month or so after it came out, but it was matched up with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that was the other film, and that was a few years old, and that one also blew me away. So my little 12 or 13-year-old brain, oh my God. I developed an instant affinity for both of them, and I subsequently saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in other venues, and just became kind of obsessed with it. Just an incredible movie, made in Louisiana for nothing, and just as disgusting and gross. I made Greg watch it for the first time, probably back in the 80s, and I think I've got more of a stomach for that kind of thing than he does. And he told me after we watched it, he said, "I think I need to take a shower." I loved it. It is kind of, the movie is kind of filthy. It is dirty. And it's not because it takes place. Well, it does take place in this rural area, and it feeds into my fears of rural areas. And that's another. I have a fear of public transportation, and I have a fear of the sticks. So I think both are very healthy fears, though. I don't think I need any therapy for it.
No, I don't think so either.
Probably need more therapy for the type of films that I like than anything else.
When you share when you finish sharing your presentation, I have a story I want to share about these stories and how they played themselves out before they made it to the screen. Before these movies existed, they existed in like modern folklore, and played
Yes, very
themselves
much
out in real weird ways. And one of them, I got caught up in this and interacted with in a way that wasn't expected. So it's a funny but strange true tale. And then, of course, a few years later, they were all over the movies, and everybody understood these stories and experienced them on the silver screen. But before then, they were very much alive and very scary and involved people directly rather than sitting in a screen watching them play out.
Yeah, when I haven't taught literature Oh, a long time. It was not my forte, let me tell you. And I always tended to gravitate toward horror. So no matter what class I was teaching, we'd have this lineup of Washington Irving and stuff like that, because it's like, if you go with science fiction or horror, you will actually reach a few students.
Right.
But if you try to get them to read War and Peace or A Tale of Two Cities, they're going to freeze up on you. So, and I had enough latitude at the time where I could pick what I wanted to teach. So, well, at least I'll like it. And we had some really good discussions about it. I would get people who were upset because we were only talking about horror, but well, these novels are just like everyone, all the rest of them. You can teach, you can teach, narrator and epistolary novels. You can do everything with them. So I was just trying to teach form, but I had to have something for them to read to teach form. So I picked what I like. And you're right. Some of these tales are very, very old, especially a lot of these films. It's not just a maniac with a knife. A lot of it, there's a lot of sorcery. There is a lot of witchcraft in these films, including Suspiria, which I guess is probably obvious. That's one of my favorite movies, for a lot of reasons. I think it's just amazing. I think it should be required to. Like kind of like Citizen Kane or The Wizard of Oz. Oh, it's a great movie. I think it's his best movie. And it's got a fantastic cast, incredibly watchable. He thinks Dario Argento's best movie is Deep Red, and it's good. Buckets of blood in it. That's kind of the thing I like about Suspiria. Argento's movies do tend to be pretty bloody, and it's not so much. I mean, it's more, I guess it's more tasteful. I don't know if that was Joan Bennett's influence or what, but it is not as gory. Maybe she was able to talk him into like toning it down a little bit or something. Who knows? I don't mind gore. I mean, I kind of grew up on it. And I've watched a lot of the really early slasher films from the 60s. Herschel Gordon Lewis's movies that we've talked about in the past are just fantastic, gutter cheap, low budget slasher films, but lots of fun, very watchable, not very well acted, but that's okay. But you're so appalled by what you're seeing on the screen that you don't mind if they flub their lines.
Very true.
Anyway, I know we're starting to run a little short on time, and there's a few things that I did want to talk about. I already talked about Friday the 13th, which I saw that. I was like 14 years old or so when I saw it that summer, and there again just kind of blew me away. Just such a good movie, and not really knowing who the antagonist is. I love that, because you just don't know who it is, and you're trying to figure out, which cast member is it and such. Love that. So much fun, and you get a little element of mystery, a little noir, essentially, in your horror. It works pretty well. I wanted to talk about another film that I've seen several times over the years called Graduation Day.
Yes, I remember that too.
And it works so well with this topic. And it's one of my favorite actors too, Christopher George. Did you watch The Rat Pack when you were, not The Rat Pack, excuse me, The Rat Patrol. Did you watch Rat Patrol when you were a kid?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay. It was popular there for a couple of years, and it was like a war-themed TV show. And I'm thinking it took place during World War II, didn't it, Greg? Yeah. Anyway, Christopher George was one of the stars of Rat Patrol. And inexplicably, I don't know why, but my grandmother, when I was about 2 years old, bought me a Rat Patrol lunchbox way before I could go to school. And it was the one I took to school as a kindergartner, and by then, kindergartner, and by then it was several years old, and all the kids were like, "What the hell?" They all
Retro.
had they had Partridge Family and stuff like that. And I got this TV show that was canceled 3 years ago on mine. But yeah, that was kind of my childhood too. But Christopher George, the star of Rat Patrol, it did a lot of horror movies late in his career. He died really young, sadly, when he was shooting Rat Patrol. And he came to acting, later in life. I think he was in his 30s before he even started, doing it.
Mhm.
And kind of met with almost instant success. I mean, took an acting class and then started getting hired. Just a kind of a lucky guy, but talented, and he had a lot of charisma too. Well, on the set of Rat Patrol, he was in a rollover accident in one of the military vehicles, and it did something to his heart. It injured it in some way, shape, or form, and that it eventually led to his demise. And he died in 1983 from a heart attack, and they think it was the damage that accident caused. Anyway, he's the big name star in Graduation Day. I mean, he's not in every scene by any means, but he's when your name's above the credits, I guess you get to do what you want to do. There's an interesting story about the Graduation Day too. One by one, the members of the track team start getting picked off in this high school, and it all takes place around the date of graduation for this high school. So all of these potential high school graduates are being snuffed out. Vanna White is one of the potential victims in Graduation Day. The letter turner from Wheel of Fortune.
She played Venus or Aphrodite also in the film.
Yes, she did. Well, she had a connection with Christopher George. Although they weren't blood relatives, Vanna White's mother was raised by Christopher George's parents. In sort of a foster sense. So Vanna White was sort of a member of the family. And when she came to Los Angeles, he helped her out. This was one of her early roles. I mean, ultimately she didn't have an acting career, but she had a career in the media. And then, that's, as long as the check cashes, you're fine. But it's a lot of fun, and if you haven't seen it, you can find Graduation Day. Yeah, there again, I'm sure it's on YouTube or something like that. No, we have a copy of it, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of people buying physical media anymore. But I got to tell you, I'm so happy for all of my physical media. I know that the day is coming when DVD players are going to no longer be manufactured, and I'm going to buy a stack of them.
I'm going to buy a few.
As tall as I am, I'm going to buy
I
one.
learned my lesson with the VHS players. I didn't buy a VHS player. Now I don't have one. And well, the flood destroyed my VHSs, but they wouldn't have been down there if I had a VHS player.
Well, that's a good point. I actually do have a couple of working VHS players. I bought one around the time that they went out of production, and I thought, well, I've got some old home movies, from the 80s, 90s, and I hadn't transferred them to anything. I think I have since, but this was a long time ago. And I thought, gosh, I better buy one. And I got one from Amazon, which also is I think it's a DVD burner as well. And so it's easy to move like home movies and things over to it. But it cost so little. And now I could probably get like $600-700 out of it because there's a market for them now.
Right.
Funai made, I think they were the last ones to make VHS, VCR players and recorders. And one year they only sold 750,000 of them, and they decided to end production because it just wasn't I guess there wasn't enough of a manufacturing efficiency there to keep making them. And it's a shame that they did, because I don't know if anybody's manufacturing VCRs now or not. There could be somebody out
There could be. They're manufacturing old video game consoles with the games in them.
there. Yes.
So there might be a market for it. It might be inexpensive. The quality on those varies widely and wildly. I
Yes,
picked up
you're correct.
video games, and again, some of them were worth it, and some of them were not.
True. Yeah, very true. And I guess all of that's kind of our nostalgia that has to be aimed at us, right?
Yes.
So I'm always fond of complaining that marketers don't see people our ages, other than for diaper commercials, or you get a reverse mortgage on your house, stuff like that, or end of life insurance. Those are always fun. But that's but at least these sorts of things, I guess this really is aimed at us, because who else would buy it? Now that I say that, though, a lot of younger people who do like video games are interested in the origins. Where did this come
Yeah.
from? What did I gotta hate to say it, but what consoles did my grandparents use? uh, and I had an Atari 2600 when I was a teenager, and you know what? For about a good 6 months, 7 months, I loved it, and put the joystick down one day and never picked it back up. I'm just not. I used to like to go to the arcade, when I was a teenager. Every mall had an arcade, in the college town where I went to college. Had one on the main street, that we all would go to, and it was an easy way to meet people. And you know what? Occasionally in the college town I now live in, we'll still have a pop-up arcade here or there. They don't last very long, but there are a lot of gamers out there. A lot of kids love gaming.
Thousands. Yes.
And I think it's been to the detriment of television and film. To tell you the truth, I don't think a lot of kids are tuning in the way that as much as we might have watched.
The games are cinematic now, almost. Like some of them look like
yes,
they're real people in environments that are CG, but they look real, and it's like playing a movie and determining what happens in the movie. Everything from shoot 'em ups to mysteries to science fiction adventures, and they have like movies in them, and you can watch the movies on YouTube. It's people just film the movie parts and get rid of the game parts. But their cinematic quality, they feature celebrities or actors of note. It's really amazing. I don't have the patience anymore.
Some of that's really lucrative for actors too.
Right.
I mean, especially if it's an actor whose name might be able to sell a game. But some of those people really clean up. And a voice actor, for voice actors, that's a huge market for them. A good voice actor, somebody who has a repertoire of voices, can work very little and lead a very good, very prosperous life, shall we say. I've known a couple of people who've done voice work, and the more talent you have, the more voices that you can project, the better you're going to do. And especially if they're really spot on, if you've cultivated voices, if you can do foreign accents and things, you can work every day of the year if you want to.
Yes, we got the retros. I played with them for a little while, and then decided that life is short. I'm not going to really play retro games anymore. So now they're on the sell on eBay.
Well, what retro games were you playing?
I got for the Atari 2600. I got.
Did you get Space Invaders, Centipede?
Yes, Space Invaders. I wanted to play
wow.
Adventure and Venture, and those really like the early fantasy games. And
I'm
you really
gonna
have to your imagination to see what those were. They were very weird representations that your mind somehow translated into what they were. They look nothing like what they were supposed to look like.
No, they
I think-
didn't, but I kind of liked it that way too. Space Invaders looked nothing like space, but
Right.
I loved that game. I probably played it solid for a month, maybe longer than that. And one that I still revisit every now and then, so I guess I do game a little bit now that I think about it, is online in so many different areas, you can find a free Pac-Man game to play.
Yeah.
It's kind of awkward because you have to use your cursor keys, and your space bar instead of having a joystick or something like that. So it's not quite as easy to play, but sometimes I'll just get bored and get sucked into doing that. And I guess Pac-Man must have been the zenith of my gaming because that seems to be the one I default to. I'm a big Tetris fan too, though.
Uh-huh.
And talking about dating yourself. I mean, that was the first computer game, wasn't it? Other than Pong.
They came out when I was in high school. My last year of high school, Pong came out then, and it was shortly followed by like a game called Tanks, and then there was one with like a little racing car where you had to run people over and they became zombies, and then you had to avoid them.
I remember that was an arcade game too.
Yes.
And I can remember, some of them actually had like a seat that you got into it and it had a steering wheel.
And I remember somebody made an R-rated or X-rated Atari-style game, and that was a big controversy. But again, it looked nothing like Human Anatomy, and nothing like what they were doing looked not. It didn't look like any human activity, but because the box was suggestive and the gameplay.
So it looked like genitalia that somebody made with Legos.
Not even that. It was worse than that. It was really, really bad.
I don't remember stuff like that. I must have lived a more sheltered life.
And then there were the video games lead to demonic possession, and there were all sorts of things going on, and or training you to be a murderer, all sorts of things.
I guess my childhood wasn't as dark as yours, Hercules. I thought it was.
I was already into that. With the movies you were talking about tonight, when I was in high school, I think I was in sophomore or junior year, but those movies hadn't come out anywhere. They didn't exist yet, or if they existed, they were so rare that it was something you heard about and then sought out. But I used to go camping. And I grew a beard and grew really big when I was 11. So by that time in high school, I looked formidable, and I used to lift weights and do things like that. So I was the protector. So like if a parent was concerned about their kids going into the wilderness, they used to talk to me, and I would make sure that they were okay, on these camping trips that we took. And they were the explorers, which were like co-ed Boy Scouts. So it was both young, like men and young women too, teenagers. So anyway, so we went to the camp, as we did for a very long time. And then somebody from the camp counselors, from the administrators there, they told us to be very careful in the woods because somebody had escaped from a psychiatric institution for criminals. And in this part of New Jersey, there was such an institution, not close, but not that far away. And they said that the person's name was Hatchet Harry, and he had an MO. He liked killing young people. And they said that they don't think he's in the area, but just be careful, So, okay, again, I became like very focused on this because I promised to protect people. So I took that very seriously when I was a teenager, a big teenager. So anyway, we were there, and it was nighttime, and I was, I believe, just wearing my pajama bottoms or something. I wasn't wearing very much. It was hot. It was so I was sleeping on a table, and around 2, 3 in the morning, I saw somebody out there. So people would get lost in the wilderness all the time, at these camps. And I got lost at camp. So I saw somebody outside. I figured they might be lost. They don't see any lights. So let me go help them. So I opened the door, and asked if the person was lost. And the person moved where I could see them because there was a moon and stars out, and they had an axe. And they were wearing like a Halloween type mask.
Mhm.
So immediately the warning that there's an escaped, person who's a murderer, whose MO was killing people, and I'm responsible for all those sleeping people that I agreed to protect. So I yelled a Greek war cry, and I ran out and jumped on the guy, and I knocked the axe out of his hand. Then I found a rock and I started pounding I pounded my dog's head with that one. Pounded his head on a rock a few times. Then some people came and grabbed me up and said, "What are you, crazy?" And it turned out that the guy who told us this tale was the person wearing the Halloween mask. So I was angry and indignant, and it's like, what do you mean? You guys are in charge here, and you told us to watch out for a murderer. I'm responsible for sleeping people, and there's somebody with a hatchet right outside where we're sleeping. And anyway, we got it straightened out. In my mind, I knew that if I had access to an axe, I would have gone out swinging, because we were warned by the staff to be careful of murderers. And here's a guy in the middle of the woods at 3 o'clock in the morning with a hatchet, and we were on the lookout for Hatchet Harry. So anyway, I bet that's the last time that person tried to scare campers by
Well,
telling them to be
define wilderness for me. Where were you?
in the woods. We were in Jersey in a Boy Scout camp that is pretty large. So we were in the middle of nowhere. This wasn't like right off the road or
Oh,
so.
Hercules. If you want the middle of nowhere, it's just over the hill from where I live. And
This
you
was
want to talk about this? This is some deliverance, scary shit. Just being in the woods in New Jersey doesn't sound like the wilderness to me.
growing up in New York. It was the wilderness to me.
I'm 200 feet from a Starbucks. It's the savages.
No, it isn't. It's isolated. It's right off a highway. But it's a pretty big area that hasn't been touched. So you can get lost in there for hours without seeing anybody or anything.
Well, I think we have different ideas. I think we have different ideas of what wilderness are.
Okay. Let me hear your story.
Well, no, I don't really. Well, I could tell you a lot of stories about the wilderness that would keep you up at night.
Okay.
And that's just from the last year. But no, gosh, I guess I don't have a story here. Like I said, I'm afraid of rural areas, but I tend to live in at the same time, so that's kind of odd.
Facing your fears.
Facing my fear.
Yes.
Well, you as you get older, you kind of forget what your fears are, or they change really. Your fears become, I hope I don't. I hope my knees still work, so I'm not crippled. In a couple of years, or gosh, I hope I don't have a stroke. That sort of thing. You fear life events more than anything else as you get older. So if you were claustrophobic or had a fear of heights once upon a time, you're just like, there are bigger fish to fry now.
My puppy is here. She keeps jumping on my
Oh, there she is.
She keeps jumping on my leg. So if I'm looking in weird directions, it's
Well, I would show you a cat, but they all sleep until about midnight and then they're up. So I don't know why cats are so nocturnal. I mean, I guess it's the best time to hunt, and they're, even though my cats have never hunted for anything except a can opener and somebody with opposable thumbs. I think that's just in their nature. Now, that said, one of the first cats that I had as an adult had kind of human hours. And I kept late hours once upon a time in life. I don't anymore. But especially when I was in school and working, I'd be up pretty late at night. And this particular cat, he would come and get and start running back down the hallway. So I would go to bed. And then he would sleep there all night. He'd be there all night with me. you know.
We've had cats and dogs too. Our dogs now have a schedule, and they want to make sure that
Dogs are easier, but cats, I mean, the ones I have now, if it's midnight, they're like teenage, well, they're like college students. At midnight, they're alive, you know, they're up. During the day, they're just, they're a lot like college students now that I think about it.
my dog is a mistress of leverage. She knows exactly where to stand, so I can't get up if she wants to get petted, or if I'm sitting down too. She knows exactly how to place herself where I can't sit up. So.
My cat Lily, who passed away in December, could find any of your major organs with her paws, and had a knack for just that was her first step. Bang! So, well, there goes my liver. Yeah. She's
learning that.
Well, she was a petite cat. You know, she was pretty small frame, and her little feet were as bony, yeah, and could just go between ribs. And, I mean, she would get on me, and I'd be like, ugh. And it wasn't because of her weight, because she was a small cat. It was just those bony little feet, and where they could go. Yeah.
My cat Freya was very perceptive too, and she knew exactly what poses I found like heartwarming, and she would do them. You know, she knew how to manipulate me.
Oh,
Like
yeah, I've got one of those now. I named her after Tippi Hedren, and and she works the room too. She likes to stir shit up. She's not she's not happy unless there's some crap going on. So and she likes it if she's the one stirring things up, I guess I should say. But yeah, she works it every morning. She knows that I hate it when she gets on the countertop, and every morning she hops up on the countertop and then looks at me like this, yeah, as I'm getting ready to feed her, you know. And she actually will lean up for a kiss. And she,
yeah, my
several times. And she doesn't want to be kissed, but she thinks that I want to kiss her. So, and that's not, she's actually doing that as some sort of consolation for me, I think. But
we're at 20 after. Do you want to wrap up, or do you want to keep talking?
yeah, we should probably wrap up. I got a long day tomorrow. Your Fridays are often rough. And I got to do payroll and stuff. So yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you, as it always is. And I remembered all these movies as you described them and talk about them. Athena was very big into. I was into Dark Shadows, but not as much as Athena. Athena was in one of the Collinsport players that did.
Oh, wow.
They did skits at these Dark Shadows conventions. She knew all the stars from Dark Shadows, and she's still in touch with a lot of Dark Shadows people. And in one of the vampire books, there's an entry for Dark Shadows, and in several editions, her pictures there in with the Collinsport players. So we have to do a Dark Shadows episode and try to invite some of these folks that were still involved with that.
Excellent. That would be fun, because you know what? That was the show that got me into horror. My mother watched it every day, you know, Monday through Friday, and you watched what your parents watched back then, and and even as a small child, I just got hooked right into it. And there was a lot of kids marketing too. I mean, it was popular. Yeah. And we've talked about this before, but I had the board game and all of the marketing stuff.
I had models, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I even had Barnabas Fangs and stuff.
Me too. Mm-hmm. I had the Barnabas model. I painted him because I'm a couple of years older than you, and I kept him in the coffin from the Dark Shadows board game. And
yes, yes, I still have mine, believe it or not.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, mine vanished 1 year.
My mother threw none of my stuff away. When I left for college and never came back, she just left it all there. And it's well, in that respect, yes. I mean, I need to. we've talked about this before as well, but we're both getting to that stage in life where you have to really decide what stays
Yeah.
and what goes. And a lot of that stuff needs to go, but you're going to have to pry, my board game version of Dark Shadows out of my cold dead hands because I'm not selling it.
We found
Even
a
though
Dayglow,
I bet they made 5 million of it, but I don't care.
but still, yeah,
That
it's a
was mine.
special. I had mine. I wouldn't let that go either. I have the Dayglow Barnabas T-shirt that we found that was in the
Oh
attic
wow.
recently. And I found a Barnabas poster. Unfortunately, it's very dog-eared, but he's there with his cane and his, his locks. Anyway, how can people find you and enter the retro horror universe that you opened up?
It's really easy to find me on the World Wide Web if you go to briansdrive-in-theater.com, and that's Brian with an I. And if you want to interact with me on social media, I am on Twitter, but I'm just a lurker there. You will be able to interact with me much better if you come to Facebook and run a search for Brian's Drive-In Theater, and then my Facebook presence will pop up.
And Brian has a Facebook presence in other places as well, especially in the Peplum arena,
Yes.
where you can find him wherever you visit, whatever group you visit, he will be there. Thank you again,
Well,
Brian. Say hi to Greg, say hi to the kiddies, and
Bill.
we will talk again very, very soon. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night, Hercules, and thank you.
Thank you, and good night to everybody who's going to tune in. Right now it is around 10:30, and this will be up on YouTube at midnight, which is appropriate for a horror show. Anyway, be well, everybody. Take care.